Long ago, in a quiet valley where the air was sweet with the smell of wildflowers and the sound of rushing streams echoed through the hills, there was a little village. The people of that village lived simple lives. They rose with the sun, worked in their fields, cared for their cattle, and gathered around fires in the evenings to share stories. Their huts were made of mud and straw, their clothes were plain, but their hearts were often light. They lived by what their hands could earn and what the seasons would grant them. Yet, in this humble village, there stood one house that was not like the rest. It belonged to a man named Gregory, who was the richest man in the valley. His house was grand, built of stone, with tall carved doors and windows framed with glass that caught the light of the sun. Behind his house lay his pride and joy, a vast garden unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. This garden was Gregory's kingdom. Within its walls grew trees heavy with fruit, apples, pears, figs, and peaches. Vines hung with grapes, their clusters gleaming like jewels. Flowers of every color lined the paths, filling the air with perfume. A fountain bubbled in the center, its clear water sparkling like silver. To the villagers, the garden looked like paradise itself. But Gregory guarded it jealously. He often walked through his garden with his chest puffed out, boasting to anyone who would listen. "No one in this valley has what I have. My garden is the finest in the land. Every fruit, every flower, every blade of grass here belongs to me alone. Not a soul shall taste them unless I allow it." The villagers, who could barely afford to taste fruit once or twice in a season, would glance at one another but say nothing. They did not dare anger the rich man, though in their hearts they knew that his pride was greater than his wealth. One summer morning, as the sun rose over the hills and painted the sky gold, the little sparrow came fluttering into the village. Her feathers were plain brown, her wings quick, her eyes sharp and bright. She was small, almost too small to notice, but her voice was clear as she chirped from tree to tree. She was not afraid of humans, nor of dogs, nor even of the looming house of Gregory. The sparrow's sharp eyes soon caught sight of the garden, and her tiny heart leapt. Fruits gleamed among the leaves, and seeds lay scattered by the fountain. To her, it was not Gregory's pride, but a gift of nature, meant for all who hungered. She darted through a small crack in the garden wall and perched on a pear tree. With a quick peck, she tasted the sweetness of the fruit. Gregory, who was strolling in his garden that very morning, noticed her. His face twisted in anger. "A sparrow," he roared. "A thief. How dare such a worthless creature touch what is mine?" He clapped his hands and called his servants. "Drive that bird out. Chase it. Do not let it steal from me again." The sparrow, hearing his fury, fluttered just out of reach, perching on the highest branch and chirping as if mocking his rage. When the servants rushed with sticks, she darted into the air and flew out of the garden wall with ease. From that day onward, the sparrow returned again and again. Each morning she would slip into the garden, take a seed here, a berry there, sometimes a tiny sip from the fountain. She never took much, only what she needed, yet every time Gregory saw her, his anger burned hotter. "This is my garden," he fumed. "How dare a mere bird defy me? I will show her who is master here." He set traps, scattering crumbs of bread beneath nets. The sparrow was too clever. She pecked at the edges but never stepped into the snare. He ordered his servants to keep watch, but she slipped past them with the swiftness of the wind. He even brought a cat to patrol the garden, but the sparrow taunted the cat from high branches, darting away whenever it pounced. The villagers laughed quietly among themselves. The mighty Gregory, defeated by a sparrow, they whispered. But Gregory heard, and his pride was wounded deeper than any wound of the flesh. Weeks turned into months, and still the sparrow came. Gregory's fury grew until he could think of nothing else. One evening, he sat in his grand hall, pounding his fist on the table. "I am the richest man in this valley. I own the finest garden. Am I to be mocked by a bird? No. Tomorrow I shall end this once and for all." The next morning, he prepared a grand feast in his garden, inviting wealthy guests from neighboring villages. Tables were laid with roasted meats, fresh bread, wine from his cellars, and fruits from his own trees. Gregory planned to display his wealth and power, to silence any whispers of his defeat. But the sparrow had been watching. She perched upon the garden wall, her sharp eyes gleaming with mischief. As the guests gathered, she swooped down unnoticed. She pecked at the ripest fruits, scattering pieces upon the tables. She fluttered into the fountain, splashing water upon the guests' robes. She darted among the dishes, dropping seeds into cups of wine. The guests gasped and murmured. Some laughed, others frowned. Gregory leapt to his feet, shouting, waving his arms, chasing the tiny bird in circles. The sparrow danced just beyond his reach, chirping loudly as if mocking him before all his honored company. At last, she flew to the highest branch of the garden's oldest tree and sang out in a clear voice. "Gregory, Gregory, proud and vain. Guard your garden, it's all in vain. For what is wealth if kindness dies? A sparrow sees through human lies." The guests fell silent. They looked at Gregory, red-faced and panting, and then at the tiny sparrow who had bested him before their eyes. Slowly, one by one, they began to laugh, not at the sparrow, but at the rich man who could be so humbled by a creature so small. Gregory felt the laughter like arrows in his heart. His pride crumbled. He sank to a bench beneath the tree, covering his face with his hands. For the first time in his life, he saw himself clearly, a man so blinded by wealth that even a sparrow had to teach him humility. When he lifted his head, the sparrow was gone. She had flown into the wide blue sky, leaving only her echo behind. From that day on, Gregory changed. He opened the gates of his garden and told the villagers, "Come, take what you need. A garden grows not for one man's pride, but for all who hunger." Children ran through the paths, laughing as they gathered fruit. Old women plucked herbs for their pots. The villagers looked upon Gregory with new eyes, not as a tyrant, but as a man who had learned. And though the sparrow never returned, her song seemed to linger in the rustling leaves and the flowing fountain, reminding all who entered the garden. True strength is not in wealth or power, but in courage, humility, and kindness.